Hi, Stephen. Thank you so much for being on the Next in Line podcast. We're super, super excited to have you on as our next guest. And just to introduce yourself to the audience and give us a little bit more background about yourself and your career, do you want to take us back to the beginning of your marketing journey and kind of how you got to where you're at today?
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for having me on the show. Excited to talk about my journey. So actually, interesting story is I took my first marketing class in high school back when I was like 14 years old. And I was like, oh, okay, this seems interesting enough. Like this seems to be like where the direction I want to go with my life. So outside of high school, I signed up to be a business major in college with a concentration in marketing. And I really, really wanted to do marketing, not sales, outside of when I graduated. And so it took me a little bit when I graduated to land a job, but I eventually landed a job as a marketing assistant at a small IT consulting company. And then I was there for 6 months, and then I got recruited to move down to the Atlanta metro area from Raleigh, North Carolina, because I went to NC State. So that was a big move to a bigger city, which that was basically my plan. I got recruited by a company called Doosan. They're heavy construction equipment. So it's interesting when you're in college, you only know like big consumer brands, and you don't really know anything about B2B at all. And so that was my first taste of B2B, understanding a completely different industry with no prior experience, no prior knowledge, no history of anyone within that industry. And so it was definitely a good learning experience from both, just even working with a small IT firm to a much larger organization that's global. It's a Korean company, South Korean company. So like from there, I kind of was able to, unfortunately, when I first started on my career, it was like near the crash of '07. So I got laid off from that job. It took me a long time to get another job just because there wasn't a lot of opportunities, kind of similar to, I think, the times now. It was interesting because that was almost 20 years ago myself. And so, I was experiencing that, and 20 years later, like a lot of people are experiencing that kind of same type of environment. So it was definitely a challenging environment, but I wanted to stick at it. I, kind of continued to pursue applying all these tactics. I was able to land a job with a financial service company. I was there for a little bit as well, and then got laid off. I went to Georgia Tech, had switched a couple of departments, and then finally landed at Delta Dental, and then I got recruited to come here at my current role that I've been for almost 10 years now. Was at Kloeckner Metals.
Nice. So a lot of different industries from early on in your career, it sounds like, to now. Now, being that you've been, kind of I would say in a good mix of industries, like I just mentioned. What do you think is the biggest shift you've seen in how companies think the marketing role inside the business has changed within itself? Because like you said, like earlier on, it was a little bit different in your career to now. What was that like? And what is that like currently?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's also a different perspective when you're, in a more senior role versus a junior role or mid-level role. So, I think the ultimate end is like, I think marketing is hard to unfortunately define into one bucket. I think when you look at industries that are or careers that tend to have a more like clear path, like financing, accounting, things where you're like, okay, you're an accountant, you're going to do accountant things. And so I think in marketing, like there's so many different layers, right? Like we went from just marketing, like marketing and ads, then there's digital ads, and there was social media, then there's now there's AI. So there's so many layers and new branches. I really do see marketing as a big tree with a bunch of branches, and but unfortunately, like organizations tend to comprehend it as like, no, you're not a big tree with many branches. You're just all individual branches. And so I definitely see some value if there's like reducing silos, but of course in a larger enterprise it's a lot harder to just remove any silos at all.
Yeah, for sure. Because I feel like the larger the corporation you're at is, you need more departments, you need people, but then at the same time, now with the whole AI thing coming up too, like people are now going on and using that and utilizing tools to maybe scale their teams. So it looks a lot different now, I would say, than it used to, for sure.
Yeah. I'm currently in a B2B legacy environment, and so we're not early adapters of AI per se. Obviously, we're trying to figure out, the best use cases for us. And even on the marketing end, like, that we tend to be a leaner organization in general. So we definitely use AI to kind of help us with projects of that nature. But, we're not rolling out this full workforce of AI agents or anything like that quite yet.
Yeah.
So yeah, but obviously, with other industries, there's definitely different opinions and things of that nature. So it'd definitely be interesting to kind of see how the workforce adapts or changes within the next 5 years.
For sure. I think even sooner too, just with like the speed of how technology is evolving, like we're going to see changes from now up until like year over year, I think, faster. Now, being that you mentioned the whole silos in the departments, this is a really good question that I wanted to ask based off our prep. And I know you talked a lot about the death of a CMO and how marketing has splintered into silos, especially at large corporations. You mean that's something you can't control, but just in general, it has. What do you think needs to change for marketing leadership to really thrive again? And can you double down and kind of explain to our audience what that death of a CMO really means to you?
Yeah, and I think I kind of alluded to it earlier in our conversation. It was just really the simple fact that, marketing is so diverse. It's not defined by one thing. You ask any CEO what the definition of, what the marketing department is responsible for or full ownership. Every CEO is going to give a different opinion.
Yeah.
The majority of CEOs come from mostly a finance background from the research. So, it's your strategic quarterback essentially is not too overly familiar with what a marketer does on a day to day, then that lack of understanding could also turn into a lack of value essentially
Yeah.
as well. So yeah, really the challenge for marketers and really like the highest level marketers within your organization is just really that internal sales channel, like really selling the department, really showing the value, really understanding what resonates with your leadership team, and really getting in there and trying to drive that change or drive that innovation or even do things to make an impact. And I think it's been challenging, especially in a B2B environment. It's a challenging thing because obviously in most B2B environment, the commercial organization, the sales team is really the forefront of what gives most attribution to
Yeah.
revenue. So and so obviously, marketing can become a sales enablement support channel for certain organization, and so it really is just about that, communicating that partnership and communicating like the skill sets and the diversity of skill sets within the marketing organization to really deliver greater revenue or greater attribution to certain aspects. And so I think a unified commercial team with marketing is really like the key. And so I think, but yeah, but if your organization already has many silos, like like you see these like chief growth officer, you see chief revenue officer, you see chief brand officer, like, so there's just so many different layers where you keep on stripping core marketing functionalities into different departments. So obviously, it's harder to say, oh, we're all one unit, we're working together to try to do one thing collectively.
Yeah, for sure. And I feel like with that, like you really, with the different, I guess, C-level roles that you just mentioned, like you would really have to leverage those partnerships and really getting that internal buy-in and making sure that relationship is strong in order to accomplish the main goal of the company and all of that, rather than if you just had that one specific title like CMO that was overseeing everything, it could be a little bit easier to kind of make those decisions and come together with, let's say, the sales department or whatnot.
Yeah, and it's challenging, right? Because like brand in itself is hard to measure.
It
Like you
is.
you can't say, oh, because of our brand we generated X amount of dollars just because they knew who we were. You can't put that on paper. And then I think that's really the ultimate challenge of any marketing organization is like the core of marketing is building a brand. And obviously there's different approaches on how you build a brand, but not all of them have a direct
Yeah,
a direct number to say exactly because of this, because of who we are, we got exactly X, Y, and
X
Z.
amount
And
of yeah,
yeah, and so it's not as easy. I mean, I think if your sales and you're like, hey, I was targeting these 5 companies and I closed 3 of them. Yeah, that's simple math, right? Like,
yeah,
versus, oh, we created, 10 million impressions. Well, how many of them, how many of them were our target accounts? Like, so
yeah.
it just
How many converted?
Yeah, exactly. So at what point, right? And then you're like, oh, was that a sales conversion, or was that a, on, what channel converted them, and or how many
Yeah,
touching points did it take? So there's definitely, and so I really kind of challenge people's mindset to be like, oh, those aren't really like we shouldn't necessarily define success based on like exact conversions, right? It's really about like
absolutely.
it's really about touching point understanding of who the company is, like the messaging that resonates with them. So it's like, the overall strategy of like we've added these other elements to the buying journey, and therefore now because of this, now we are able to see like growth or speed of conversions or things of that nature, whatever the metric is that you're trying to do. So you just really got to take a step back and be like, oh, it can't just be one simple formula to define success within you know
That's very true. I love that perspective. And now that you're talking about defining brand awareness and everything that we're talking about now, it's like I remember you joking about this. I think I remember saying it on your LinkedIn page, and I wanted to bring this up here is that in your industry, I know you said like that your marketing team, you like to talk to them about that you guys are like the Apple of your industry, right?
yeah.
And that you're trying to make steel sexier than it already is.
Yeah.
What has it been like building a brand in a legacy, commodity driven industry where people don't naturally think of marketing in that way, let's say?
Yeah. I mean, I think historically speaking, like marketing in our industry were like people who did like PowerPoints and who ordered swag. I mean, like
Yeah.
it just really, yeah, like so it's not even it's a very limited definition of what marketing is. And so yeah, it really is about education, educating really folks and doing things differently. I think, the great thing about our space is like anything is like wide open. Like, nothing has been done before, so it's a really pushing boundaries on what we can and can't do. I think, we can use some of the playbooks from other industries of what worked and what didn't work, apply that to our industry, and it's like, oh man, that's a completely novel concept here. So it's interesting when, yeah, like things that a joke here is that the industry is like 20 years behind. So it's like, things that social media, like, which has been, obviously like consumer brands have been using social for the last 5 to 10 years now. And it's like,
Yeah.
now it's like, generally across the board, leaderships are now seeing there is value to trying to connect on a digital space. But, obviously now at this point, things are overly saturated. So it's like, we want to jump into the party when it's like, now it's more complex to
Yeah.
go viral or to make an impact on just on social in itself. So it's an interesting thing, but we just kind of keep in mind, it's like, as long as we continue to do things differently and to really stand out from the same messaging that everyone else is doing, and because like, yeah, like we are commodities, right? So we can just say this is who we are and this is what we do. You need us to make your final product, but really like, trying to take that. And so I think, for us, like in this last year, we launched, we're trying to basically connect with our audience. And so, our messaging this past year is like, we build North America. So it's just really trying to connect the dots from, our products and the metals that we sell to the final products that basically shape our economy. So from cars to ovens to refrigerators, like that's all us, stadiums.
Awesome.
So yeah, so it's really and so it allows us to get a little bit more creative with the creatives, also implement a lot more video content than we normally would. And so
Yeah.
yeah, just really allow us to tell that brand story over and over again. And so I think that definitely makes us more fun. Our secondary logo is also a dog, so we can lean in on that. So that we have a mascot. So most
That's
companies in our industry don't necessarily have a mascot. So that gives us that flexibility also to have fun and incorporate like animations and gifs and videos about the dogs or holiday videos about the dogs. So things that we just made a plush toy for the dog. So to
so
give out at yeah.
nice.
So definitely trying to lean in hard on the dog and using that also to connect with our audience.
Yeah, for sure. And I feel like doing things like that, I mean, you will be standing out because of the industry that you're in. It's not normally likely for someone to be doing that. So it definitely makes someone, it catches their attention, it makes them stop and be like, oh, what are they doing over there?
Yeah. I mean, like, typically speaking, like, at a trade show, yeah, like it's very common for people to give out just, graph paper and pens. And so you're like, okay, let's get a little bit more exciting than
Yeah.
Just graph paper. If everyone's giving away graph paper and pens, like how many pens and graph papers can you take from a booth space? So yeah, no, really trying to think about that. I was like, okay, what would attract people to our booth? Like even because I've attended conferences where like I'm a parent, so I hear other parents like, oh, that booth over there or that company over there is giving away this. My kids would love that. So
Yeah.
they go booth shopping or swag shopping. So yeah, but I mean, it still gets them in front, some face to face. So just really trying to think of different methods to really try to connect with our audience and just be able to push our brand in that way.
Yeah, for sure. I like that approach too. And, being that we're actually talking about the industry that you're in, you've been working here for around what, 10 years now? Is that
hmm
right? Okay. So being that you've been there for 10 years, do you want to tell us a little bit about how you built the team? Because I remember in our prep session, we kind of talked about that. And um, what has been your leadership style in the way you've built the team and balancing out how you manage that or building that from the ground up? Like, what was that process like for you or that journey?
Yeah, I think being in a legacy industry where marketing is like I was the first marketing hire within our organization. To the definition that we're defining marketing as, and so it's really showing the value of marketing and also educating our leadership team on the different types of skill sets within the marketing space, and so really showing like, oh, here's if we add this resource, here's what we can do. If we add that resource, here's what we can do. And so just
Yeah.
really, running little small, essentially like, use cases of like, okay, if we do this, like, like little case studies across the board. So I think, I really had to show the value. We're still a very lean organization and understanding that, like, at Delta Dental, I was like one of 100 people within the within the team. So obviously that's a big marketing, like understanding that in this environment, that's not going to be the case. So it is really about like, okay, here's who we are as an organization. Here's what we value. Here's what's going to basically show value within the organization, or here's what's going to resonate to the leadership team. So this is, I need this skill set. And then once we thrive in that role, then we're like, okay, here's what another skill set that we need, or another type of resource that we need to kind of grow. And this, this could be good or bad, but in my world, I've been able to hire mid to senior level talent. We don't actually have any junior talent on our team, so there's not a lot of hand holding or coaching or mentoring in that sense, because a lot of my colleagues are already team members are already well versed in what they do, and they understand it. They're specialists there, and they have that maturity to kind of run with it. So it allows my job to be a lot easier, because it's like I hired you. My job is to hire you to do your job, and so to trust that you'll do it. My team is actually fully remote. Yeah, we have well, we only have two different, but we have someone in New Jersey, someone in Washington State, and someone another team member further down in Georgia. But essentially, like it is like, yeah, I don't need to see someone. Like I think what's great about marketing is like you'll know if we're lagging or we're slacking off, right? Because it's like
Yeah.
nothing's getting produced. So if you're like, hey, what's going on? Like, what are you doing with your time? So
Yeah.
and yeah, like I said, like, the whole point of hiring someone is that we entrust them to kind of help us thrive and utilize that skill set in whatever manner they choose. So, I'm blessed to have a great team, the people who take their job seriously,
Of course.
but also able to, even though we rarely see each other face to face, we get on Teams calls or it just have a touching points throughout the week to make sure that, we all stay in contact and understanding what's going on. So yeah, I mean, I mean, like you hire, like the whole point of hiring is to help your organization excel. I don't
Exactly.
care what, and for me, I don't care where you live. I don't care, yeah, I only hiring people I can trust, and so I don't need you to tell me where you're going and where that, like so. It is all about like here's what we have, here's our task at hand, here's what the goals are. So let's just accomplish those goals. And obviously, if there's a lack of communication, I mean, like we're marketers, so we're supposed to be better at communications as well. So like if you have something going on, just you got to communicate. I can't read your mind. So that's
Absolutely.
essentially how I take it, and like I think it's working well. I think the leadership here has definitely seen the value of marketing and the types of resources that we've been able to add to the team, and it's been going well. So hopefully, we can continue to push and do great things and get more grow our team slowly but surely. So yeah, so happy of where we currently are.
That's amazing. That's an amazing story. And I also like, so you said your team is fully remote. Have they always been remote, or is that shift after the whole COVID situation happened? Or did you guys kind of like do that before that? How's that like?
So in my case, I've actually everyone currently working for me, I poached essentially. So my first hire, our acquisition manager, she used to own her own agency.
Okay.
So I convinced her to sell her business, sell her business, essentially essentially fire all her clients, and so she joined us full time.
Wow.
The second person also, yeah, we worked together before at a different company that she was working for when I reached back out to her, and so like say, hey, would you be interested in working with us? And here's what she's a excuse me, she's a young mom, so just respecting that flexibility and what she needs to do her job well, but also give her that flexibility and comfort level, so that we definitely piqued her interest because she's like, oh, okay, like this is someone that she already knows and understands, or what within reason what the flexibility is there. So she jumped on board, and then the last person was just someone I met at a conference. So
Oh, nice.
so basically, and actually, the first person, our acquisition manager, I met her at a conference as well. So yeah, so I had necessarily, we tend to also do like this contract to full time model without it being official. So being the first person being independent, that was easy to contract, and the last person was freelancing already. So, and they're more of a designer, so that's very
Yeah.
normal. But yeah, so it really is like you don't really know someone's work ethic or their culture fit until they actually join the company. Unfortunately, like
Yeah.
they can interview well, they can interview bad. Like you just don't know. So, but no, like I think the team likes being here. That's really important, and and so we try to do things to keep everyone motivated, and try to like for me, I try to be as transparent as possible about like their progression, how they're doing, and things of that nature. But it's not overly structured, but at least there's some point of conversations about that on a daily basis.
Yeah, and I think that's super important. Like, no matter what level you're at in your marketing career or your career in general, having those transparent conversations from your leader is what keeps you going, right? Makes you gives you the feedback, make sure that you're also on track and all the things that come with, a job. So that's super good. And now I know that you mentioned that typically your team is comprised of already people that have a lot of experience, but we're going to kind of shift gears and talk to the next generation of leaders, especially marketers. I wanted to ask, if you were speaking directly to a young marketer, what's one skill that they should master to stand out and stay relevant in the next 1 to 3 years?
Yeah, I think it's a really understanding your audience that you're talking to. I think like if you're let's just say you're a young marketer and working full time, like really understanding like what your leadership team values, and really communicating like consistent and like not over the top. Like it's a fine balance between like bragging or boasting your skill sets all the time, or being too in your face. And so you just really have to have a good balance. But at the end of the day, like our job is to basically put ourselves out there, right? Like the company out there, so that people know about us. And so at the same time, like you as an individual, your brand or your product as well. And so you have to make sure that you're uh, that everyone knows that you exist. And so I think that's, yeah, like, every touching point, you might have limited exposure to the senior leadership team, but, definitely try to make the most of that. Like, obviously your direct supervisor or your managers, like, or, like even if your boss is a marketing manager and there's a VP or there's a, like, so yeah, like it is really like, making sure that every touching point that you do is somewhat impactful or memorable in a positive way. And I think like really trying to hone in on your skills. Like I remember, yeah, like every day I would spend like an hour, like on back when Twitter was a different type of format, like on Twitter and reading articles
Yeah.
about the industry, about like things that are happening, and it really does change your mindset, or gives you a better perspective on what's going on. Oh, this is what's working in marketing. not working in marketing. And so, I didn't necessarily get heavy on following anyone specifically, but just like, trying to diversify my feed to really see, this is this person's viewpoint. That's a really good, interesting viewpoint. How can that apply in my own career? And so it's just really like, when you're young, you tend to have a little bit more time and a lot of more free time as well. And so you definitely want to absorb as much information as you can,
For sure.
gain that knowledge so that you can have a sense of maturity when you have conversations, and those conversations can obviously leave a positive impressions, to your, in a sense, to your superiors within your organization or even outside your organization. So, it is really about, and yeah, like I think in general, right? Like I think the best people to work with are the people who have the best attitude, and just, if you're easy to work with, like it's easy to get ahead, or it's easier to kind of move along in your career. Like, likability is extremely important. So no one wants to work with a difficult person or a challenging person or someone who can't take critique. Like, those are things that you really have to like understand that, criticism isn't necessarily like, me versus you, like nothing, like it's not absolute. So you have to take things in stride. So really having that kind of mindset early on in your career, I think will get you really far ahead.
For sure. I think the earlier you learn it, the better it's going to be for you later on. So you don't take things the wrong way when it's feedback, and you just learn all those things and go through all the kinks early. So it's just easier.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then the last question to kind of wrap up here is, if you could go back and give your younger self one piece of advice when you were first starting out in the marketing industry, what would that be and why?
Yeah, that was like I think the challenge with like giving advice from like obviously like now I have years of experience where I didn't have any years of experience, and so I think the joys of growing pains is that you are going through growing pains. Like so, even if like I mean I'm sure we have this where there's someone in our lives who's older who's been through something like i.e. like our parents, right? They're like, oh, don't do this, and like it's different. It's different. You don't understand. So even like so I tend to take this question as like, even if I gave myself my younger advice, like I might not be able to understand, comprehend what I'm exactly saying. And I do notice that like I do some mentoring with younger marketers at times. And I think sometimes like when, the conversation I'm having with them, it doesn't necessarily seem to like it doesn't seem that, yeah, they grasp the concept of what like I'm trying to communicate. So we really try to break that down to make sure they understand how to move forward with this piece of advice. And so, yeah, so not to cop out of the answer, but like I don't really have any advice for my younger self. I think making mistakes is part of life, and like because I think I learned from that. Like you learn differently when you actually make the mistakes and see where
Exactly.
you made the mistake and how you can change or what you can do better in the future versus someone saying, "Oh, don't do that because you might make this mistake." And if you never
Yes.
lived through that experience, like it just not to say you can't succeed, you can still succeed without ever making a mistake. But it's kind of like a relationship where like they talk about couples who, oh, we don't fight. It's like, well,
Yeah.
if you don't fight, like how do you know how to handle conflict within the
Yeah.
relationship? And so I think that's the thing. It's like like yeah, maybe that's my advice like to my younger self, that just continue to do what you do, and if you make a mistake, like try to learn from it as quickly as possible and make adjustments.
Yeah. I think actually, now that you mention that too, I remember growing up in my like teenage years, my mom was always saying, "Hey, don't do this, don't do that." And I was like, "Don't tell me that, because if I do it and I do it wrong, let me just learn. I'd rather
Yeah,
go myself."
yeah.
And, that was always like a battle growing up, but it's true now. Like when you make those mistakes, I feel like those mistakes are really lessons learned, and
Hmm.
they make you stronger, they make you better, they make you, more, I guess, like you already know what's coming if that's already in the works. So I think that's great advice. You did a good job with that advice. I love it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like I think it's different, right? Because I'm a parent of a 3-year-old, and so obviously there's certain things that are blatantly like, don't do that, like
Don't do
where
this.
yeah,
Yeah.
don't do yeah. So it's more black and white with a 3-year-old, but
Yeah.
yeah, I say this all the time. Is like like when I'm saying this isn't like there's no gray area in this. Like it's like it's an absolute thing. Like don't touch the flames, like
Yeah.
don't open the oven, like like while it's
It's
on.
not
Yeah.
that time today.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we don't have to debate about this. Like, so, that, obviously, like if it's something like that, then yes, listen
No,
now and
for
change your
sure.
behavior. Yeah. But obviously in marketing, your career, it's a lot different with a lot more variables.
Yeah, for sure. I completely agree. Well, thank you so much for being a guest today. That's all we have for today. And yeah, I had a great conversation with you.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on. And I had fun chatting about myself, I guess. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.